are not small dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And they say I want a Glen because I want something calmer and smaller. And I'm like, this is the opposite. This is way, even if, people who downsize from Irish Wolfhounds, which isn't uncommon at all, they're looking for an easier dog. And I'm like, it's a smaller dog, but it's way more powerful and strong-willed than the Wolfhounds often are.
Mm-hmm. And what is a typical height of the dog?
Well, that is where we are trying to say that the dogs, the standard says 12 and a half to 14 inches. The native standard doesn't have a bottom, and they're 35, around 35 pounds. And that was kind of to make them the same size as the European Badger. So if they're going to pull them out, that, they're about that size. They can be bigger. When they have done the survey on Glens, 35 pounds for a male that fits the standard of 12 and a half to 14 inches, that has the body is long, deep, and full, that deep chest. So they go, oh my God, look at the head. No wonder they're so big. And I'm like, but what really makes the dogs heavy is this long rib cage that has a very big heart and lungs and viscera, and those organs are what weigh a lot. So we focus on what the weight of a Glen is, but a judge can't pick the Glen up. They have to just look at them. So our standard is actually pretty hard to fit for a mature male, because if they're 12 and a half to 14 inches with a chest that's long, deep, and full, maximum substance for size, that at maturity you're going to see a Glen that is between 40 and 45 pounds. And obviously there can be ones that are their outline's perfectly correct. They fulfill everything otherwise. But if they're 14 inches, they're probably going to be closer to 50 pounds at full maturity. It says in the standards and the various standards around the world that it says bitches less or bitches somewhat less. It doesn't say how much. And in my particular line, what I see over and over is my males are short leg, they're deep chested, so they're under that standard with that deep chest. So that old fashioned look to mine is they don't have tons of air underneath of them, which is fine. As I said, like they dig and work underground the same way the dachshunds do, so that they have that long rib cage and it's rocky ground. So they're going to rest on their sternum or their breastbone, the bottom of that. And because their elbows are, the chest is deeper than the elbows, they're not going to be scraping their elbows. They can sweep the dirt out to the side, and they can wiggle through and around in this rocky ground, roots and things like that are underneath. And they can work very well that way. So, but my females tend to be quite a bit smaller, much, really like 30 pounds, and, it's 12 and a half to 14 inches. My bitches are usually about 11, an inch shorter. And then they can have really big boys. So in each litter, it's like that. So, not all of them are like that. So we have what we call kind of doggy bitches, which sounds very insulting, but they kind of do well, as like the girls look like, they have a lot of substance and look more similar to the males. Mm-hmm. Just in my particular line, it's just weird to me that I can have what, I'm kind of accused of having the pocket Glens for the girls, but my pocket Glen girls can have these, whopping big boys, because they have that back in the background. So we have that size that's there. But more important than the exact numbers is I try and press on people, this is an incredibly powerful dog. And when you go to look at it, fluffy, cute, stuffed animal, if you go to pick it up, I think that people are prepared to have them weigh about half as much as they do. Mm-hmm. So this expression comes over their face like they went to go pick up a piñata and it turned out that it was made of cement. Or they said, the clay pot, one that's filled with dirt versus empty. They're not hollow. That's not hair. That's organs. It weighs a lot. And so when they pit that weight against you and those powerful, powerful muscles, with very little activity, they just stay very fit and extremely muscular and strong. They can, pull a truck, I think, pretty easily. They're just unbelievably strong. So you have to work with the puppies and say, you're not ever to use your physical strength against me. That's not what it's for. Mm-hmm. So if you fail to do that, then you get to have the experience of being yanked around like you're water skiing. It feels exactly the same, like the boat bolted before you were quite ready. And your arms feel like they're coming right out of their socket. It's not pleasant.
And could you talk maybe about some of the modern health issues that the Breed Club is aware of and working on?
Well, the big one that we started off with was this was discovered about a decade ago, is that, and it's the easiest one because it's what we call, it has a DNA test. So you can do a blood test, and it's a simple autosomal recessive disease, and it causes a late onset blindness. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't really discovered for a long time. There was probably a lot of affected Glens. And when a dog becomes blind in old age, like with cataracts, which you can see, you can't see this, is that it goes along with some of the things that people think happen as dogs get older anyway. So they maybe want to stay closer to the home, and they're not like us. So their eyesight is not their governing, their most important sense. They use hearing and smell a lot more. So if their eyesight starts to go, and it doesn't go until they're 8 to 10 years old, it doesn't start to go away. I think that there are probably a lot of affected dogs, and it just wasn't really recognized until we started looking for it. And when we started looking for it, we found out that it was actually pretty prevalent, but there's a blood test. So as long as you know what your dog's status is, and you don't breed a carrier to another carrier or a carrier to an affected, then you're not going to have any puppies that have any blindness. So a carrier, a dog that has one normal gene and one affected gene, has no symptoms whatsoever and never will have any symptoms. So you don't have a partial expression of this. It's an either or. So you have to have 2 copies of it to have the disease. And even then, it's a little bit variable expression. So some will maybe go blind a little bit earlier and a little bit more severely. And some dogs might, even though they're affected, might not really notice. But we won't be noticing because now that we have the blood test, no responsible breeder is going to breed any puppies that have this. Currently, we are required to test for hip and elbow dysplasia and also to look for other eye diseases, which is common in a lot of breeds. But my interest is in skeletal dysplasia and things like that in humans. So, I think this is important information to gather, but these are not clinically necessarily big problem diseases. So I think that the biggest problem for Glens is not what we have now, but what we're looking at is it's important to use health testing as information, but people say, I want to go, this is what I did with human beings. Like, I want this test, I want this test. And it's natural for us as human beings to think if I did enough tests, nothing would be affected or sick. There's no way of warding that off. So you look at this and you generally try and make responsible decisions, stay current, new information all of the time, try and make sure that you're doing everything environmentally. Like hip dysplasia now is very much related, we know, to the environment that the newborn puppies are in. So if they're on slippery surfaces, they can slip one time and, pull those hips out of alignment in a permanent sort of way. So, exercising them the right way for Glens, like they should never jump down. They're a heavy dog. They shouldn't be, while their growth plates are slow, take a long time to close. Jumping down is like an old lady, like falling down and putting a lot of weight on her wrist. It's just going to break. So you don't want a young dog to be in a position. So going downstairs is either very careful or an overall no, definitely jumping down off of any sort of height, like sofa or the bed or things like that. It only takes one jump to crush a growth plate and, make the legs grow unevenly, or the bones in the legs grow unevenly because you damaged that growth plate, which is already very fragile because it's a dwarf dog. So I think paying attention to nutrition has something to do with it. You don't want them to grow too fast. So for me as a breeder and my genetics background is you can't separate these things out, the environmental effects, the epigenetic effects, or the genetic effects. So they all act together. So you do the tests that you can to make sure that you're avoiding genetic things if possible, but you also make sure anything that you can do from an environmental point of view to prevent a propensity to have a disease from ever turning into a disease. I put a lot of effort in that because we have a lot of control over that. So I think that's very important. Now, what I had said before about being careful about over-testing is we have had this huge increase in canine cancers and across many of the breeds. So when you have a breed like Glen that have a very small gene pool, and what that means is once a breed becomes recognized and registered, you can only use dogs that have parents that are both registered. And people don't understand how gene pools work. They would think like, okay, well, I need to go outside of my breeding, like go to maybe Europe so I can expand the gene pool. You can never, and people who should know better constantly are saying this, which is a terrible misunderstanding of how genetics work. It's like when you close the stud book, this is what this is called, like you can no longer bring any outside dogs. That was the day you stocked your pantry forever. Mm-hmm. So from then on, you will never have any more genes than you did on that first day. You can never add another gene in. And so each generation, the only genes that go forward are the ones that were used. So if you think of it as a pantry, is once you've eaten something down, you can't ever get it again. So once you ate all the sugar, there's no sugar, there's no flour, So we want to have an approach, this is what a preservation breeder would do, to keep as many genes as we can. So you look at all these dogs and you say, what do they have to offer to the breed? But mostly people look and go, will this dog win a dog show? Or how much does the dog cost? So there's other factors in which dogs are kept that really go against preservation principles. So my goal as a preservationist is, especially, when I place new puppies and things, is especially with the boys. I say, well, as a breeder, my heart's with the girls because, that's where your litters are going to come from. And I watch this and each one. But the boys are the future. So if I have nice boys with good coats and good temperaments and great bone and substance and maybe freedom from diseases that we'll keep finding and being able to run these DNA tests that someone could say, oh, my dog has this trait, and it seems like lots of Glens have this, you might be able to go back and get frozen semen on a dog that did not have that. So my goal is to sort of bank as much of the, worthy dogs for the future that we can. I feel that's the best way to help safeguard the preservation of the breed that way. Because again, the dogs that don't get used, all their genes are lost forever. You cannot bring them back in again. So, we take one and we breed, people are kind of like, I want to breed the best to the best. Well, what's the best? I mean, to me, a good breed example that has a good coat and a good temperament and things like that have those qualities, they don't have to be the one that won the dog show. Mm-hmm. And in fact, sometimes I would look and say, my ones that will win the dog show often are because they're flashier or their show-off personality, which maybe not be the greatest temperament for your companion dog in the world anyway. Mm-hmm. But overall, those are the characteristics of, like, we should be keeping, I think, and breeding many of these good, very good or good Glens that are healthy and sound and have the characteristics we need in the breed, instead of this scrabble to have the best to the best which is really just based a lot sometimes on style and fashion and things like that. And that would be fine if after 5 years you didn't turn around and everybody tried to breed like to one style, and now all of the other dogs, like as I said, mine old-fashioned type is like, well, maybe you don't like that. Maybe you like a prettier or fancier dog. So but what's the end result? That all of the dogs that aren't like one dog are lost forever. So I think there's a lot of room because there's interpretation, especially if the dogs have the important breed type characteristics to hold on to these for the future. And so for me, again, for all my puppies, I'm like, I can't do this by myself. So people who have Abberann Glens, they have to be part of the mission. They have to care about the breed. It's what comes along with one of my puppies kind of comes that responsibility. And they don't need to take it on. There's plenty of other people selling Glen puppies. But for mine, that's why I do it. And I can't do it by myself. So everybody, I don't make people do it. I just try and find people that's the reason that they wanted a Glen in the first place, because it helps us all work together and think about the future of the breed. They're great mothers. They have large litters because, again, that giant dog thing a lot of the time. So I've had a couple litters at 10. And, but they're very, very good mothers. And they live breed pretty easily. I'm an OBGYN doctor. I have a higher cesarean rate than I probably should because, knowledge is deadly. So every time, things that people might not know could be like a little warning sign. They don't know that it's a little warning sign, so they wait a little more patiently. Not me. I kind of like alarm bells go off. So I probably have higher rates of this because I keep track of numbers like progesterones and things like that. I don't let them go over to, I'm excessively cautious. I just don't have the nerve to take the risk when I know about the risk. So, ignorance is bliss, and that's definitely true. And the little knowledge, like in my part, is deadly. So I'm pretty careful. And so it ends up being quite expensive. And also, I watch all of them. They're big dogs and they're good mothers, but I live in the whelping box. Like for 10 days, I don't leave. It's in the back of my, I have a big walk-in closet, and that's my whelping room. I have everything set up in there. It's next to a laundry room, and basically I don't leave to do anything except for to go to the bathroom that's right adjacent to it, because something could happen in the blink of an eye. And I think of watching humans with their new babies, and I help new moms establish, that's that sort of obstetrician thing is to, whether you nurse your baby or not, pump or use breast milk it's a pretty steep learning curve in that first 48 hours or whatever, to help them get ready. And there's a big push towards human babies is you can never sleep with the baby because you could roll over and they could, they can't be on their back. And moms have a lot of anxiety. And I always laugh and say, well, you never see human people like in the hospital. I live in the whelping box, but I never see anyone saying, well, you can sleep with your baby because I'll just sit here and watch you and you're not going to squash your baby while I'm watching you. So it would be nice for human mothers that are trying to get in sync with their infants if someone would watch them, but it's very unusual that breeders tend to be, kind of over the top.
Right.
And I'm definitely over the top as well. I would fit right into that mold as well, I think.
Yeah, right.
Well, I end up talking, so personally, I feed a mostly raw diet that is pretty high quality. I don't do homemade anymore because I travel a lot and I want to make sure things are easy for my husband. So I feed a kind of a lot of commercial frozen, raw, or freeze-dried. And then for growing stages like pregnant moms, puppies, lactating moms, they need extra carbohydrate along with that. So then I feed kibble to all of them in addition. But I tell people, my diet is pretty expensive, and I've written a book on eating, as a doctor, called Evolutionary Eating, How We Got Fat and 7 Simple Fixes. So I'm very interested in diets in general and different kinds of food and micronutrients and things like that. So, I'm willing to spend to sort of experiment. I think there's a lot of really good quality kibbles. And so when people say, so why don't you feed it? Well, I really don't like brushing teeth, and I have a lot of dogs, and I have found that by feeding the raw food diet, my dogs never, ever need to have their teeth cleaned, and that's probably has more to do with it than anything. So I sort of go, I don't have to give supplements, and I don't have to brush their teeth, and I don't have to get their teeth clean. So the expense evens itself out in the long run. Maybe it doesn't, but it comes closer, and that's how I go about doing things. I think that there's pretty good guidelines that each year is that you just feed a high quality food that comes from high quality ingredients, and there's a lot of them, and then people keep changing their there's new research that comes out every 6 months. So I like Whole Dog Journal. I think it's a really good resource. They review wet foods and dry foods every year, and I use that as a guideline. I rotate my proteins so that they're exposed to a variety. I tend not to feed chicken, mainly because the chicken and chicken meal is kind of in everything everywhere. So there's just lots of other choices. So it was anecdotal. Like I have one dog that was sort of allergic to chicken, and I probably that I just sort of avoid it. I don't consider them to be allergic to chicken. I use chicken as treat and baits and things like that. I just kind of avoid it. I'm really sort of anal retentive about the omega-3s. I don't feed any fish from a bag because it goes rancid immediately. You have to pay more from it. So the omega-3s that are in that are very fragile in terms of air and light. We know that anyway. So I don't, if it says fish, I don't feed fish from a bag. My dogs get sardines or mackerel once a week on Friday. That's all they get. Or salmon or krill oil, which has no protein in it, and so you can do that with the pumps. And they also all get coconut oil, and I think that helps with. It's good for gut health, and just in general, it's got antimicrobial and antifungal properties, so they get that added. And I think probably makes their coats nice and things, but it just helps add some fat to that diet that doesn't make the dogs fat. So I'm careful with the carbohydrate. I think that's what makes them fat. Anyway, all kibble, you can't kibbleize something. It has to be mostly carbohydrate. So I just look at kibble as a carbohydrate source. So it says the protein amount that's in it, and that's manipulated around, or they use a lot of soy protein and things. So I don't like soy protein. I like regular meat proteins, the kind of things that I would eat myself, like identifiable animal food source. So I think those are just general. Is it necessary? Probably not, but it's what I do, and I do not twist people's arms to do that as well. It's just the way that I do things, and I think there's lots of good choices. Mm-hmm. The breeding part takes a huge amount of my time, and sort of promoting the breed, I go to dog shows in conformation. I think that Glens do exceptionally well in a lot of their performance things, and one of the ones that they really they love the fast cat or lure coursing, which is a sprint. Mm-hmm. So they like to go real fast for a very short distance, as long as it's not too hot outside, and they're quite good at that. They like the nose work or the scent work. They changed the rules because the dogs are short, and with their legs, as long as you wait until maturity to have them jumping, a lot of them like to do agility. They're suited for obedience only with someone who is not is doing things with their Glen and sort of understands the process and has a special team bond with their dog to do things, because generally they're not too interested. It doesn't make much sense to them, so
Right.
they're not obedient.
Mm-hmm.
They would enjoy being obedient until you were lulled in, and then when a whole bunch of people were watching, you would be very disobedient. That would be very entertaining. That is a very Glen thing to do, to like draw the audience and then do none of that. But they can learn it. They love learning tricks and things, but they don't get bored, because they will amuse themselves at you have to have a sense of humor to have a Glen. They very much enjoy making you feel foolish and sort of laughing about that. So I had to learn some hard lessons that were embarrassing from my Glens, because they, I guess the best way to describe it is mocking. They like games, and they like you to sort of get flustered and lose your temper. So they do recognize like that you're in different places, and you can do some things some places but not others, and they like to do they will make things into a game. And a lot of times when people come, they go, why are they doing that? And I said, well, they're just doing that now because you've made it into a game. Mm-hmm. Like I have one person who it's not a common behavior in Glens per se. It's not uncommon for puppies to eat poop. This is something that a lot of puppies will do. So there was one, and she said, he just keeps eating the poop. And I'm like, but you just are so upset and riled about it. He's just like playing watch me gobble the poop as fast as I can because you're going to go crazy. Yeah. And I said, it's like, you need to watch, Mad TV and watch Stuart, shove things in his mouth faster than his mom, mother says, don't do that, Stuart! Then that's the Glen. Like, it's like, this is just too entertaining to pass up. It's worth eating poop over. So they would do things to, they really like that interaction and the game of it. So as far as training is concerned, I definitely recommend people when training them is that they use like what I call the positive choice method. So there's a lot of people who are doing this. The science is way behind this. And so you generally ignore things that you don't like because Glens love you to go no. They go, yeah, you think no, so don't ever say no if they're going to get the upper hand, and they get the upper hand with amazing frequency. So, I will say knock it off and kind of keep control and boundaries, but in general, I try and think one step ahead and have them have a choice and say, are you the dumb dog or are you the smart dog? And they love to be the smart dog. Mm-hmm. So they a lot of times will do what I want so that they can be, or, I can't say what I want, or they might not want, but they make the choice that gets them to figure it out. So I have learned to be more patient and wait, and it seemed so counterintuitive to me for the way I was trained to start with dogs, but it works brilliantly with the Glens because they do like to be smart and to have made the right decision. And you have to wait and give them a chance to figure it out, and they like figuring it out. And they love the engagement with their person. So it's based, obviously, on you get this reward, like you get a treat if you do it the right way. But honestly, they just, the time they get to spend where they're, like, really with you in that time is very rewarding to them inherently. So I found that works great.
Interesting.
Like, I don't have a kennel. My house is sort of a semi-kennel.
Yeah.
But a lot of people go, it's like, I have all this land. And I'm like, yeah, well, I have a lot of land too. And my Glens like to spend a lot of time, barking at the back door. They want to be where the people are. Mm-hmm. So if I'm out in the backyard, they're perfectly happy, or out anywhere, they're happy to be out there. But if I'm in the house, they want to be in the house. And they have an uncanny ability to tell whether you are working or looking at Facebook on your computer, because they act like, stern governess if you're like doing text messaging at the dinner table.
Yeah.
They know what you're doing, and they're like, if you have time to be socializing with them, you have time to be socializing with me.
Yeah.
But they really, like, they're super easy. They're not a demanding, in usual way. Like, they're not a lap dog. They're not bothersome. They're great, like, if you work at home, because they just kind of go where you are and stay in the room. I think that they like to watch human beings like we like to binge watch TV. I think they just like watching what we're doing. So they really do not like to be excluded. And I learned the biggest punishment I can do to a Glen was taught to me by my Glens, which is if I want to punish them, I look at them and establish eye contact, and then I avert my face. That's exactly what they do to me. And I'm like, I go, you're dead to me right now. Like, really, that, like, you are nothing, you don't even exist. They're very communicative, and I do that with my body language because that's what they do to me to let me know that they're displeased about something. They first make sure that I'm looking at them. So they don't just ignore me. First, they make sure that I'm paying attention, and then they very deliberately turn their head or their gaze away from me. So I just said, oh, obviously, you think that's a terrible thing, so I'm going to do it to you. And they definitely think they hate that. So they want to be, they're not intrusive or needy or anything, that way. When people call me and say, they're doing this, they're demanding, they're scratching, they're jumping on me, and I'm like, because you are not communicating with them. And they're trying all these different ways to get through to you, and you're going to have to learn to watch them and be interested, because you don't have to do what they say, but they won't stop trying to get their message through if they don't think that you've heard it. Mm-hmm. So you get a lot of, then I'm like, well, apparently you don't hear anything except for shrieking or jumping or pull. You don't have to have those behaviors if you were able to, just communicate with them. And they're watching you all the time. So our body language is really, that's common in dogs across the board. It's pretty intense in the Glens. So that's why I said a lot of times people who have sort of good dog sense and are used to being around dogs, or maybe more challenging dogs or multi-dog households, it's not training. It's not a dog trainer. It's dog behavior. So it's a lot of those things about sort of awareness of what their behavior is. So for some people, they go, I don't know what you're talking about. And you would think they did it naturally, but we don't do it naturally. We just probably observed it at some time, and, we do what works. So does the dogs. So they become those people, and people who are like that they're, air quotes, good with dogs, they generally think Glens are awesome because they're so intuitive. Mm-hmm. And they usually are, and people say, well, what are they doing? It's the same as professional athletes. It's not what they're doing. It's what they're not doing. Most people confuse the hell out of dogs because they're doing 50 things at one time. The dog's like, what? What do you want? I'm trying to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And they're like flapping their, like, I'm trying to get them not to jump. And I'm like, but you're flapping your hands like there's some sort of a flirt pole or something. Mm-hmm. They don't know that that's not a tug toy because you initiate it by flapping your hands. And they will always go, what do you mean? I don't know what you're talking about. You have to video them, to say the dogs are watching all of these, and we're just unaware of the lot of things that we do. So people who are good with dogs, I'm like, just quiet down. Like Cesar Millan, he's so controversial, his methods or whatever. I said, but if you turn off the volume, okay, and just watch him, and then, like, just be like him. Like his body posture and things around dogs, he gets this great behavior because dogs understand him. Mm-hmm. Because he's clear. He's not doing a whole lot of, he's blah, 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 and you don't need to listen to any of that as much as just watching, not doing anything except for what needs to be done so that your communication is clear. Well, that's not very natural for a lot of people, and they're, They're unaware, but the dogs don't know the difference. They're like, what? What do you want? You're saying 50 things all at once. So I'm just going to ignore you because clearly you don't have a clue. And people are, shouting words, and dogs don't understand the words. And the shouting is like, I know you're upset about something. I just have no idea what it is you're all upset about. Mm-hmm. So some people, that's what I say, is like it is, you can get better at it, but you have to be willing, if you aren't already there, to work on those things, because that's what the dogs are doing. They're watching us, and you're showing your poker. Most people are not very poker faced, and the Glens don't like that either, because they want to see what you want. So you show them, you communicate with your body, and then they're watching your facial expressions and things, and just their Glens are very communicative. So it's a double-edged sword. For some people, that's what makes them great. For other people, that's what makes them challenging.
Right.
Here, I'll show you my Glen side of my personality. I'm very opinionated.
Uh-huh.
And my opinions are not necessarily very popular. Mm-hmm. And I'm not one to waste a lot of time, so I don't like incrementalism. Like, if there's a big thing that you can do, I like the 80-20 principle. Uh-huh. Do something big. And to me, if we can do something that brought a lot of people to be interested, you don't need them all to pursue it. So if you bring in 100 people, and only 3 are interested, that, then you bring in 1,000 people, and that would be 30 people. So I'm very enthusiastic about doing things that would increase overall interest. And I would say I'm from, academic medicine, sort of science and things like that, is like how are scientific discoveries made. They're made like one gravestone at a time, because you have to wait for the old guard to die off before you get any new ideas. Mm-hmm. I would say that the dog show world has some of that. That being said, is everybody's got these little micromanagement things that they want to do. Not me. I think that the reason for dog shows originally is, and this is what people say, is to evaluate, to have an objective opinion about the quality of your breeding stock. And when people would go to dog shows, is to look at other dogs and who to breed with and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so they keep quoting that as if it's relevant. Well, here is what is relevant. Dog shows are where dogs are shown off. It's a competition. It's subjective. It's a contest. It's a beauty contest to some extent, or a fashion. It's some of those things, but it's a dog show. Mm-hmm. So, I think, and this is what's very controversial, is I think that neutered dogs should be allowed to be shown in conformation. Mm-hmm. Not in the altered class or anything different. Maybe, we have these things called specialties where, that's where the whole club gets together. They have their own rules. It's a special dog show where it's only one breed, and you have seminars and things, and everybody gets together, and that's definitely about breeding. And maybe they could have an altered class if they wanted to. But in regular dog shows, I think that people should want to see the dogs, and everybody just keeps leaving because it's boring. And you're not allowed to talk to people, because then they think, oh, you're trying to curry favor with the judges and things like that. So then, everyone, it's all about these points and rankings and things like that. I had to play this game, so I'm in on one side of it. But people, I'm like, well, look, if you have a female and she's had 2 litters, she's proven herself as breeding stock. Should she not compete? Mm-hmm. But if people are looking, I think a good example of the breed, that the judge should be able to point out what they think are the best examples of the breed. And if it's a male and he's being what we call campaigned, he's out there, he's usually not being bred. So you can have frozen semen on him. It doesn't interfere with his ability to be breeding stock. And as far as the females are concerned, if we're campaigning them to have a judge evaluate the quality of your breeding stock, well, by the time they've finished judging them, they're too old to have babies, and they might not even have any. Mm-hmm. So I believe it's at cross purposes, and I think it is they said, oh, well, it encourages all this stuff. And I said, no, I think if you brought in all these people and they became interested in their breed, and they were looking and talking to people and seeing, oh, this is a cool breed, and do this, that somebody would maybe start off with a dog that was neutered because their vet pushed them, or it was a pet to start, and they caught the bug. And then those are the people who are going to want to breed a litter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it just isn't enough. When you develop an addictive habit, just like a drug habit, your demand goes up.
Yeah.
So these people, they dabble their foot, and then before they know it, it's an all-consuming passion.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to do it better than other people. How do I know this? Because that's exactly how I am, and I'm not that different from a lot of other people. It's
right.
like, you talk, but in the end, you want to show, oh, I can do it better than other people. And this is nothing new. People have been breeding dogs for hundreds and hundreds of years, and to a certain extent, you can look back over the time that dog breeding as a hobby among the gentry, this is the purebred dog, it's very elitist and things like that. But look, how did you distinguish yourself? It didn't matter whether you went to college and there's grade point average. So being a person that could, was an excellent dog breeder or a horse breeder, it's a way that you distinguish yourself from your peers. It's a way to be looked up to as a skill. I mean, George Washington was an amazing dog breeder and an amazing contributor to the American foxhounds and the difference they are to the English foxhounds. And when you look at something like that about breeding a pack of dogs, the point, even though we bring them into the ring and they're judged as individuals, to hunt, what you're looking for is to have a pack that, what they call is like, you can throw a blanket over them. So what you're really looking for is a bunch of dogs who move and work together really, really in good synchronicity. So you're not breeding a dog, you're breeding this pack of dogs. And he would go off to war, and nobody had his vision, so his pack would fall apart. And then he started from scratch over and over, but he was able to do it because breeding is that one of those things. It's an art and a science and a skill. And if you do, it's hard work, but it is a way to distinguish yourself. So to me, it's all about being a successful breeder. I don't want to say I don't care about one person's opinion, but I don't. I mean, I just really, it's like in medicine, like, there's all these doctors, they have different opinions too. And sometimes you just look at all these judges, they're just people, and I don't, if they want to learn, they can learn or not learn, whatever it is, they give me their opinion, and if they gave me more input that helps me be a better breeder, that I would listen to it. But my mentors come from all over and from many different breeds of learning how to do this well. But it's just one person's opinion. And that's a big part of the game. Otherwise, the computer could do it. You could just do a video of these, and the computer could decide. And that would be no fun. And we wouldn't get to watch dog shows. I would love to see that, people wanted to stay. And if people who are listening to this are aware of how dog shows work, like it's a, tiered thing, like you go through the lower classes, and then, then the more, the best of breed winner then goes on to the group. There's one of the 7 group winners, and then the winner of each of those groups competes in best in show. And to me, a thing from a sort of a micromanaging thing that I think would change everything is to say you don't get any points for winning best in show. Your points stop at winning the group, because then the judges would be much more aware and skillful within the group. It's hard to really know, more than 100 standards like this inside and out, just like any test, and there's similarities. So I think it would be more intense. And then I think that best in show should be more of a exciting, fun, maybe a prize or something like that, so that people would be interested in just watching these beautiful dogs, but they all leave. And so we have to do something that make people, that not make people, but that entice people to want to stay. And you know what? They don't want to stay to find out who gets the points. That's what the people who are at home paying the bills are interested in. So it's pushed all the advertising and things like that. It makes people feel like it's unfair, and I suppose that it is, but it's inherently unfair because of subjectivity. But at the end of the day, you could go and we could all enjoy watching beautiful dogs. That's what I would love. And if you point to the dog that you think is the best example, you can still, that dog could still be used. They often have been frozen or, and, or you could, see, do they have a son or something like that? So modern breeding is different than how breeding was before. So those are the changes, my opinionated changes. That I would say we're hemorrhaging from the sport and we already are anemic. And, people are giving, like a 1-a-day with iron pill to try and fix it. And I'm like, nope, that's not going to work. We need a new way of getting a whole lot of people in. And I also think that we need to combat, who are we competing with? People want dogs. Okay, the demand for dogs is high. So where are they getting their dogs? Well, they like to go and do a rescue because it makes you feel like a good person. Like, this dog would have died if I didn't rescue it. But the reality is we're breeding all these dogs in just a different kind of puppy mill outside of the United States. They're shipped in. They, many of the shelters are really, it's a perfect word for them because they're tax shelters. They used to be a pound where they were impounded dogs like cars. And then we don't call them pounding, we call it a shelter. And the rescue, all those words make people feel like they're doing something good. And they are. So they're doing something good for a dog. So for me as a preservation breeder, I try and get people to want to do things for the good of a breed. Mm-hmm. Well, do we need these dogs, these purpose-bred dogs, when they can't do the purpose that they were bred for anymore? Yeah, well, that's what museums are for. Mm-hmm. They're full of all kinds of stuff we don't use anymore. And we still like them. We like history and museums. So I just say that, that's something that's inherent in people. So I think that the way of getting people interested in this is so that they can feel good about what they're doing, be interested in the history of their dog and that they're contributing. They're a curator of a living museum. So that is what the dogs are, is their living history. And they need guardians and curators and volunteers and things like that to care for it and preserve it and guard it. Because if nobody does it, then it's all lost forever.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. 100% agree.